5 men are driving in the dead of night. They have piled into a pickup truck and are pulling an empty horse trailer. The majority are from the Bois Fort Reservation in Minnesota, with Fred Isham being the sole person formerly from the Lac La Croix First Nation. They're on a mission, not to steal money or property, but to save something much more important. They're going to steal the last 4 mares of Canada's only indigenous pony breed. Let's dive into the Lac La Croix Pony Heist. The Lac La Croix pony is thought to have originated sometime in the 18th century around the Net and Vermilion Lakes area in present-day Minnesota, although oral history from elders say that the horses were on the continent as early as the 15th century. They were spread throughout the Ojibwa Nation, which at the time encompassed present-day Quebec, Ontario, Minnesota, and Manitoba. The horses would be used for various tasks, from draft work to distance riding, and then set free to roam the land in feral groups until they were needed again. This is how they ended up in the Lac La Croix First Nations area in southern Ontario. Their existence persisted throughout the many wars, territorial expansions from Europeans, and implementation of the reservation system. It wasn't until the 1940s that the Ojibwe started to notice that the ponies were endangered, after the US government wiped out the remaining pony population in the Minnesota area. According to the Ojibwa elders, when Catholic missionaries came west, they were disgusted at the sight of feral ponies breeding and wanted to shield the children in their residential schools from it. They petitioned the governments of Canada and the US to cull the ponies, culminating in only a few dozen being kept by the Lac La Croix First Nation. To save the remaining herd, they would be taken across the frozen lake and left on an island aptly named Pony Island at the end of winter, when the ice on the lake was just melting but still hard enough to walk on. Then, when the ice melted, they would be trapped on the island to eat, breed, and raise foals, away from the murderous eyes of poachers, predators, and Catholic priests. In the winter, when all the children were inside and the lake was frozen, the ponies were recovered from the island to return to a life of labor. This persisted until the 1960s, when someone decided that the pony hauling was way too much work. Let's just let them run free like our ancestors did, they said. So they were introduced back into the wild around the Ontario-Minnesota border to disastrous consequences. By the 1970s, there were only 8 Lac La Croix ponies left in the wild. A decade of angry religious hunters and accidents had left their numbers destitute. A researcher and writer, Lester Bauer, would shoot a Lac La Croix colt, mistaking it for a deer. He was in the woods originally to study the ponies themselves. This would be another devastating blow, as there was only one more male in the herd, and he was well past his studding days. In 1977, the final stallion was shot by a local hunter under the order of a priest around the Lac La Croix area. He claimed that the stallion was trying to mate with a mare in front of the children of their residential school. With the death of the last male, that would leave the population of the Lac La Croix ponies at 4 unimpregnated mares. They were also put on the radar of the Canadian Health Department, who saw the horses as pests and ordered yet another culling. Somehow this got into the ear of Fred Isham, a former Lac La Croix First Nation member and a delegate of the Bois Fort Indian Reservation. Together with Wally Olson, Walter Satella, Bob Walker, and Omar Hilda, they strapped an empty horse trailer to the back of their pickup and set off under the cover of darkness to the Lac La Croix Reserve. A quick aside on Canadian horses, because when else are we going to be able to talk about this? There are 4 select horse breeds from Canada that we would like to focus on: the Canadian, the Lac La Croix, the Newfoundland, and the Sable Island. The Canadian is a full-sized horse originating from French settlers in 1665. They have genes from the Belgian, Clydesdale, and Percheron breeds, and they are the base horse for many other Canadian breeds like the Canadian Pacer. The Newfoundland pony is a smaller breed brought to the island by British settlers. Much like the Lac La Croix, these ponies were left to run feral throughout the island when they weren't needed. Their genetics display this, having come from over 11 different pony breeds in the mountain and moorlands families. The Sable Island horse is unique in the quartet, as they are the only true feral breed in Canada, As the name states, they are only present on Sable Island, and were thought to be either a wayward European breed that was trapped on the island, or perhaps an indigenous breed that developed on North America pre-Columbian settlement. When studied, their DNA was found to be from various Nordic horse breeds such as the Fjord, Icelandic, and Shetland ponies. So if you needed more proof that Vikings found North America before Columbus, there you have it. That leaves the Lac La Croix Pony, the only pony that was supposedly here prior to the Spanish, French, or British. When researchers attempted to find the progenitor of the species, they couldn't get a definitive origin. This was most likely due to the introduction of a purebred Spanish Mustang stallion. Regardless of the origin, these were horses that the Ojibwe nation clearly found important. Why else would they nickname it the Ojibwa Spirit Horse? And that's how we get to the point in the story where these 5 men in a pickup truck go off to save the breed from total extinction. As the group kept driving through the Ontario backcountry, the roads would give way to forests and bogs. This wouldn't deter them, as they were a tough lot. Walter Sattler had a horse farm out near Pelican Lake, and Omar Hilda was known in the rodeo circles as a roping and breaking horse champion. Fred Isham, the mastermind of this whole operation, was bound and determined to stop the Canadian government from erasing all of Ojibwa history. They would portage over beaver dams, unstick the trailer from bogs, and fix other off-roading issues until they finally reached their destination, the village of Lac La Croix. A large frozen lake was all that was in their way, and they would cross it just as their ancestors did many years ago when they would hide the ponies away from angry Catholics. They managed to corral all 4 mares into the horse trailer, and they would make their way back to Minnesota to start the breeding process. They would introduce a Spanish Mustang named Smokey to stud the remaining mares, and after the birth of a few colts would let the herd roam free on Walter's farm until they became too much of a burden. Bob Walker would take the ponies to his property and contact Rare Breeds Canada to see if they were interested in saving and cataloging the unique pony. By 1999, RBC had purchased and bred 3 separate groups of the ponies, repatriating them into Canada and ensuring the breed's survival. Fred would die in a car crash, and Walter would pass away in palliative care, but their spirit would live on, through the ponies they loved so dearly, and the ponies they preserved for a future generation. Thanks for watching.